Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the 6th Annual Executive Talent Management Forum. I'm your host, Vlad Wyman, and I'm happy to have you all here. And it's nice to know that there are some usual suspects, those who never skip our events, as well as some new participants. All of this reiterates the importance of our events and the conversations that we have during our forum. The previous 5 events were dedicated to the issues of talent management with regard to millennials, organizational culture, workforce analytics, exclusiveness versus inclusiveness of talent initiatives, and automation and employment. Today's event is devoted to the fluid workforce, and in particular to talent management of this fairly new segment of our labor market. We have an exciting program ahead of us, full of useful information and interesting discussions. You will also get a chance to ask questions, provide valuable insights, and share knowledge with fellow attendees. So I would say let's get ready and begin. Looking at the agenda altogether right now, we'll start with some interactive exercises, followed by the Dean's welcome. Then I'll present the academic view on the issue at hand. Then we'll hear from our practitioner keynote. Then we'll have very interesting panel introduction and a discussion followed by that. We'll do a second interactive poll. But before that, of course, we'll do some Q&As for our audience before closing at around 11:30. So 2.5 hours packed with excitement, hopefully useful information. Now, let me pass the microphone on to Diana Fielding, who will say a few words about housekeeping and introduce our first interactive exercise. Diana?
Hello, good morning. I'm Diana Fielding. I'm a graduate program specialist with the School of Management and one of the coordinators for this event. A few notes about the meeting this morning. This is a webinar style event, so only the panelists and keynotes will have their microphones and video on. When we do the Q&A with our panelist discussion and our following our keynote presentations, that will be using the Q&A function that you'll find on your Zoom menu. So as you're listening, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A. And at the time when we get to those, we will try to answer as many of your questions as we can. If you would like to review the panelist bios or see the agenda for today or any other events, any other details about the event, please visit executivetalent.net. And now we're going to start our interactive poll to get a little bit of insight into who we have with us today and your organization's relationship to the fluid workforce. So if you would, you can either scan the QR code here on your screen if you have your phone with you, or you can visit menti.com and enter this code on the screen, and we will get started with that. Okay, so what sector of the economy do you represent? If you're not in yet, please go to menti.com. You'll be able to enter the code 38481656. We will give everyone a few more seconds to get in there and then go on to the next question. Okay, our next poll question. What brought you here today? I'm sure to learn a little bit more about talent management, some to learn about the fluid workforce, discussing the future of work. Only one person has no idea why they're here, but we're glad you joined anyway. This question is about how difficult it was to find qualified employees before the pandemic started versus how difficult is it now when the pandemic is still going. And the results of this poll will be available to everybody when we follow up with you after the event. So somewhat more difficult now than before, it seems. Moving on to our next question. Does your organization plan on keeping its existing remote workforce in place? Assuming that most businesses have gone remote over the past 18 months. And as a follow-up to this question, if it does plan to keep that in place, is there any consideration for decreasing or increasing its size, or will that be kept about the same for your organization? Now, has the pandemic accelerated your implementation of technologies that digitally enable employee interaction and collaboration remotely? And following up on that, if yes, do your employees see this rapid evolvement of digitalization and automation as a potential threat to their employment? This is going to be the last question for poll number 1. You can go ahead and leave this open as we'll be coming back to it. If you do close out of it, we'll post the link again so you can rejoin. But for now, we will turn it back over to Dr. Weiman.
Thank you, Diana. I would like to introduce to all of you the Dean of the School of Management here at Lutheran, Dr. Gerhard Apfelthaler. Gerhard?
Thank you, Vlad, and good morning, everybody here in the United States. Good afternoon to our participants in Europe, and good evening to our participants from Asia. Pretty sure that most of you have heard that old anecdote of the CFO asking his CEO, why would we invest in the development of all our employees and then they leave? And the CEO answers, well, what if we don't and they stay, right? So it's about investment in talent, why we are here and what brings us together. Investing in talent really starts with a broad knowledge about talent management and all its aspects. And that's why we have a number of years ago started the Executive Talent Management Forum here at Cal Lutheran to bring you current topics of interest, to understand the needs of industry, and to also bring you insight from the cutting edge of what academia and research has to offer in that field. And as a nonprofit university, we of course, do that not only in the form of events to contribute to the development of talent, but we also do that in the form of programs that we offer. So I apologize for this shameless plug here today for the many undergraduate and graduate programs that the School of Management at California Lutheran University has to offer. We cover a very broad spectrum from traditional management programs to programs at the cutting edge of technology, such as graduate programs in data analytics, cybersecurity, and also programs in public policy and public administration. This is an important aspect of what we do. We build a bridge between academia and businesses through supplying talent, but we also, of course, in order to do that in the best possible way, we need your insight, and the Executive Talent Management Forum is an excellent vehicle to learn from you as much as you will learn from us, I hope. So I want to thank you for being here this morning, evening, or afternoon, for giving us your time, for investing your time in the future of talent. And with that, I will hand it back to Dr. Vlad Weimann in a moment, but I would like to briefly introduce him before I do that. Dr. Weimann, as many of you know, is a global expert in the field of talent management. We can probably say that he is one of the founding fathers of the discipline in academic research, teaching, and also consulting. He has published many books and in a large number of articles in the trade media and the professional media and in scholarly journals on the topic, and is widely sought after as a speaker on the topic. Dr. Weimann, we're glad to have you here. And with that, I would like to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Gerhard. So I introduce you, you introduce me, and I really feel like I have to introduce you back again. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to proceed with my portion of our event and present you with an academic view on fluid workforce and everything that goes with it at this particular point. So let me just start with my presentation here. And let me start, with a somber note. COVID-19 is not the first, but probably the most visible and profound example of environmental disruptions. Whether we want it or we want to admit to it or not, similar disruptions may be awaiting us in the near future. Global pandemics, changing weather patterns due to climate change, and others that may bring more natural, political, or economic upheavals around the world. All of these disruptions already have and will continue to cause a lot of changes in the way we live and work. In this presentation, I would like to emphasize one interesting trend that we are now able to see when it comes to workforce, talk about its characteristics, and identify a few important implications for practicing managers. As an example that we're still experiencing, the current COVID-19 crisis has rushed the arrival of the future of work. And I'm sure that a lot of you heard this expression, the future of work, the future of work. When is it coming? According to the World Economic Forum, lockdown has seen a proliferation of remote working on an unprecedented scale, rapidly intensifying automation, the global appreciation of the care economy that includes first responders and other essential employees, and a much higher reliance on freelance, or sometimes we call them gig workers, among others. Coupled with these developments, there are obviously others brought about by such forces as aging population, decreasing talent availability, diminishing mobility of skilled labor, now that we have a lot of borders closed for both labor and goods. And the reopening has proven to be quite difficult. And I had mentioned all of these trends more than a few times in the past few years. One of the most curious, however, outcomes of all this and other developments is a visible increase in so-called fluid work. Many experts claim that when jobs are deconstructed and reinvented, permanent employees are offered inside gigs or inside projects, if you will. Labor is highly automated and becomes more or less independent from a company's physical location. Work within a company becomes more fluid. I also argue, in addition to that, organizational work boundaries become more fluid as well, since there are other types of workers, so-called fluid workers representing an outside workforce that some organizations are now using more than ever before. So in this short presentation, I will briefly touch upon all of these three factors that you can see right now highlighted and underlined on your screen. Let's start with deconstructed and reinvented jobs. For example, quoting my colleague, John Boudreau from USC, custom outdoor furniture cushion maker in North Texas transformed in less than a month to make over 1,000 gowns and 700 facials per day. Think about it, per day, as a way to retain employees who pivoted their sewing abilities to new products. So from sewing cushions to sewing face shields and gowns. General Motors, JR Automation, which is a Hitachi Group company, and SS Automation created immediate capacity to manufacture face masks. And the GM Hitachi team designed an end-to-end production line, sourced and repurposed supplies, and transformed the GM clean room into a mask factory in only 6 days. 6 days, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, these are somewhat extreme examples, but they certainly show how it's possible to deconstruct and reinvent jobs using your existing workforce and their existing knowledge, skills, and ability. Moving on to inside gigs or inside projects, many organizations are experimenting with internal talent marketplaces, with work projects sometimes called inside gigs. These are platforms usually available only to an organization's regular employees, but that match jobs, tasks, or projects to job holders and their skills and capabilities. For example, and let me read from their websites and some internal documents, Unilever Flex Experiences. By accessing the platform, I need to put my glasses on, I apologize. By accessing the platform, Unilever employees can work on projects for a small or large proportion of time, increasing the depth of their expertise of a current skill or building new skills and experiences. Through the power of artificial intelligence, people are suggested opportunities that match their profile and aspirations, and at the same time giving full visibility to all opportunities available globally across all areas of the business, ultimately democratizing and giving transparency to the way the company develops talent. Not only develops, but also identifies, right? I should say identifies and develops. Cisco, an IT company, created a gig economy for employees, that's how they call it, to open up more fluid careers within the company, work arrangements, and development. And they say a talent marketplace, which allows individuals to find short-term stretch assignments, as they call them, or longer-term rotation assignments aligned to their interests. In essence, they say we are creating an on-demand database within Cisco's four walls. So those are excellent examples of how companies try to use inside gigs or inside projects to develop people to make sure that they can demonstrate their knowledge, skills, and abilities, not only in their particular job post, but also elsewhere within an organization. Again, matching their skills and ability to the needs of the organization. Automatization or automation, if you will. And speaking of automation, it seems to be working now everywhere nowadays, right? You have probably seen images of a cylindrical robot that rolls into a treatment room to allow healthcare workers to remotely take temperatures and measure blood pressure and oxygen saturations from people hooked up to a ventilator. Or another robot that looks like a pair of large fluorescent lights rotated vertically that travels throughout the hospital, disinfecting rooms with ultraviolet light. You've also probably seen a cart-like robot bringing food to people quarantined in a 16-story hotel in Singapore. I've also seen quadcopter drones taking test samples to labs and also watching for violations of stay-at-home restrictions during the pandemic in Southeast Asia. Again, these are somewhat extreme examples, but they provide a valuable insight into the world we live in right now, as well as upcoming organizational realities. Moving on, hybrid work, right? We talked about physical location, and the issue of physical location is tied pretty tightly, I should say, pardon my pun, with hybrid work arrangements. And most experts, ladies and gentlemen, agree that hybrid work arrangements are inevitable for the foreseeable future. As the issue of physical location come to the fore, organizations begin to ask, do we bring people to work or do we bring work to people? And how do we reclassify the roles by employee segments? For example, remote workers versus hybrid workers versus fully on-site workers, fluid workers, etc. So if we start to reclassify them, what are the implications? This is a huge topic on its own. By the way, we're not going to really talk about it, at least in my presentation, but I'm sure that our panelists and perhaps our keynote speaker will also touch upon this interesting development. Another question is this: do we resize our physical footprint while maintaining quality of our workforce, including its fluid component? Google, for instance, as you know, has announced the continuation of remote work, but it's still investing heavily in facilities. Goldman Sachs, on the other hand, is rejecting remote work and returning full-time on location as soon as possible. In any case, the importance of physical location is decreasing, and as it's decreasing, organizations need to reconfigure whatever is left to support organizational priorities. And that's another important topic, right? Lastly, if you remember those three topics that I have identified for today, speaking of the outside workforce, or so-called fluid workers, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this topic because it's relatively new. Fluid workers, so these include freelancers and independent contractors, those who basically supplement the organization's own workforce and set their own hourly rates. 1. 2, gig workers, freelancers whose work is mediated through an app or platform like Fiverr, for example. These people usually paid by the task accomplished. Next is paid crowdsourced workers, employed to perform a partial assignment and get paid by micro tasks they have completed. Moonlighters, professionals with a primary permanent job elsewhere, but with a fluid job on the side. Well, of course, as well as workers who are borrowed from partners and volunteers. And speaking of borrowed partners, by the way, the Kroger supermarket company borrowed furloughed employees for 30 days from Cisco Corporation, not the Cisco I mentioned before, but the other Cisco, wholesale food distributor. And all of them can be referred to as fluid workforce, the combination of all those 6 components. Let's talk about fluid workforce in a bit more detail. Unlike the regular workforce, fluid workers are not on the organization's payroll. They're temporary in terms of nature, in terms of the nature of the contract, and they're enjoying either no or limited benefits. Their work is not really well regulated yet, as the laws and regulations are currently evolving and they really vary from country to country. Organizations use a fluid workforce to address specific needs. Usually it's specific needs when it comes to 5 factors. You can see them on the screen right now. Specialized skills, when it's, for example, easier to find a skilled talent for a certain project or a task than to develop one like that of your own. And this is the fastest way to bridge skill gaps in an organization. Second reason to hire fluid workers is cost reduction. Savings, by the way, could be in excess of 30% annually according to Forbes, since there are usually no benefits, no pensions, and no office space required. So basically, there's little to no overhead. Then quality, of course, number 3, fluid workers are specialized in a specific area of work and become true experts in that area. The speed is the 4th component, or fourth factor, if you will. With deep expertise usually comes agility, and that's where speed comes from, and globalization. And this can help provide expertise in certain new markets, international markets, without exposing the company itself to all types of market risks associated with international expansion. So those are 5 needs that fluid workers seem to cover. Functionally speaking, ladies and gentlemen, IT utilizes the most fluid workers. About 17% of its overall workforce in that function, right? 17% of all fluid workers work in IT, closely followed by finance and accounting, 15%. Age-wise, it's pretty interesting. 50% of fluid workers are between the ages of 18 and 35, and another 20% are between 36 and 40 years of age. In other words, over 70% of all fluid workers are under the age of 40, which is on its own not an insignificant fact, I think. Right? Think about that for a second. It's noteworthy, ladies and gentlemen, that with the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, more and more organizations utilize the talent of fluid workforce. In addition, of course, to their permanent employees. Even pre-COVID, nearly 80% of organizations surveyed by Capgemini, worldwide, by the way, in 2019, have used a fluid workforce in the past year. 80%. And as we indicated before, the global pandemic has obviously accelerated the usage of fluid workers across organizations and across national boundaries as well. Well, you can say, okay, this might be the case now during the pandemic. Perhaps things will go back to normal after this is all done and over with. And, I think that's highly unlikely. On the one hand, the global crisis has only hastened this shift from traditional hierarchical organization to a more fluid ecosystem, which is driven by agility, adaptability, and flexibility, and more important, limited need for a physical location. McKinsey, for example, estimates that up to 25% of the workforce in the developed world and about 10% in the developing will continue working from home even after the pandemic. 25% in the developed world and 10% in the developing. In addition to that, 87% of companies worldwide estimate that they either are already experiencing talent gaps or expect those talent gaps within the next 5 years. And your poll, the poll that we just did before that, actually proved that. It has, it proves that, I think, personally. We'll talk about that a little later. And to address that growing talent gap, organizations use a mix of actions, such as hiring fluid workers, right? Using more automation and redeploying employees into new roles. And we have kind of touched upon all of this 3 components just a minute ago. Also, the growth of fluid economy was already quite significant before the pandemic, and it's likely to continue after it's over. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, an increased proportion of the workforce, not only increased, but still increasing proportion of the workforce, especially influenced by the large influx of both millennials and Gen Zers, prefer job roles that offer flexibility, variety, and fewer constraints. So here is where the demand for fluid work meets its supply, it seems. That's where this point of intersection is. In general, I have to say that the fluid work seems to be here to stay. Listen to this, 73% of organizations surveyed just last year believe that they will be using more fluid workers in the next 12 months. And around 70% agree that the current crisis will lead them to hire more fluid workers in the future, well beyond the pandemic. The emergence and the rapid expansion of the fluid workforce and the fact that they are most likely here to stay for the foreseeable future will pose new challenges to organizations, from information security to intellectual property rights to efforts to manage talent. And as we just saw, fluid workers specifically have the potential to offer considerable value to their temporary organizations and should be part of their talent management programs. Organizations should also look at how they can effectively attract and retain freelance and contract workers at the same time, and this is a key phrase here, at the same time as recruiting permanent staff. There are quite a few other implications for talent managers, practitioners, and scholars alike. Some important questions, for example, could address the following issues: how to establish a clear process to manage and develop a fluid workforce, or how to establish an integrated talent management strategy in the company that would incorporate both full-time and fluid workers. There are other possible questions like how to accommodate an ever-growing demand for remote fluid jobs. By the way, according to ZipRecruiter, only 45% of job seekers indicate that they prefer to find a permanent job. Think about it. 45% of job seekers indicate that they want to find a permanent job, while the other part, almost other half, a little bit more, would probably love to find a gig job or a fluid job, right? Or another question, with the influx of fluid workers, will corporate cultures erode over time, especially without physical interaction, or frequent, I should say, physical interaction? Or yet another question, will the quality of human capital in a company be impaired, given the decrease in face-to-face collaboration? Those are all important questions both academics and practitioners are working on, and haven't seen too many responses, too many solutions. Hopefully, today's panel will be able to shed some light on this and other issues. So as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, there are more questions than answers at this point. So I think this is a good place to stop and hear what the practitioners have to say. And I'm sure that together we can help each other to get ready for the future of work, especially if it's already here. Our next agenda item, and I would like to introduce to you Mr. Primo Custodio. Primo has retired in 2016 as a Vice President of Human Resources for NBC Universal, after actually holding this position since 2001, and a career spanning 44 years. In this last role, Primo was responsible for overseeing human resources function on the West Coast for the operations and technical services consisting of Universal Studio operations, including production and post-production and West Coast technical. Primo began his career with what is now NBC Universal in 1972, holding various management positions in employee benefits, training and development, labor relations, staffing, and employee relations. During his tenure with NBC Universal, has overseen the human resources team through 6 significant mergers and acquisitions. Primo holds an MBA in Management and Organizational Behavior and a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Management from, you guessed it, California Lutheran University. Primo, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm still processing a lot of what Rhonda had said, and she's really, I think, just gotten us very excited about how we're managing change. But my focus here for the panel, and first of all, I do want to thank the panel again for being here and participating in our 6th Talent Management Forum. We appreciate your expertise and what you bring to the table. So with that, Vlad had talked about specifics with fluid work and its definition. And I really want to take some time here with all of you on the panel to talk a little bit about some of the points that he raised, and for you to drill down with some of the questions I'm going to present. And some of the areas I want to talk about are, this issue that jobs have been deconstructed, reinvented, that work is now highly automated, less dependent on physical location, which has had huge implications, particularly for the real estate market here in Los Angeles and the other major cities as companies start rethinking the space that they actually need in light of this introduction and more acceptance of the hybrid work week. And then finally, this move towards more reliance on the outside workforce. So I want to start my questioning, if I may, with Aaron. Hello, welcome. And my question to you, Aaron, is, does your organization plan on keeping its existing workforce in place? And is there any consideration for decreasing or increasing the workforce size? And the second part of that is, what are the drivers for this decision within your organization?
Sure. Thank you, Primo, for the question. So to start out, I lead talent management for Raytheon Intelligence and Space, which is one of 4 businesses within Raytheon Technologies. We are most people have heard of Raytheon Company, although I would claim we're actually a fairly new company with a merger last year in April 2020 between Raytheon Company and United Technologies. So, an interesting time to go through a merger, a very large merger right at the start of a pandemic. So, a lot of my questions, we've gone through a lot of change, and responses will be, kind of interweaving some of that change as well. So specific to your question, Primo, so today, over 50% of our employees are working remotely. So this varies by Raytheon business, location, and roles. For our business in particular, we are planning for a portion of our employees working remote today to continue working remote, and a portion of our employee base to go back, likely on a hybrid, kind of role type. So working, some remote, working some on site. We have found, as I'm sure many of you have found with your workforce, that our employees desire, and honestly, their work lives now with the pandemic and personal needs at times require flexibility, more flexibility than we've seen in the past. So we really see this hybrid work model as providing our employees the flexibility that they desire and need, opportunities to meet personal needs while still having time to meet with their coworkers in person. So, to directly answer the question, we expect our full-time remote workforce to decrease a bit, but that's really transitioning into a hybrid environment where, it still gives employees that flexibility that they desire. As far as key drivers for that decision, we've gone through quite the process internal in Raytheon, where we've really looked at it at a micro level, job level, to determine role types. And the 3 role types we've looked at are individuals, and the clear ones are remote full-time or on-site full-time. But you do have this gray space in the middle that we're trying to work through, as many companies, that is hybrid, right? So we know that comes in a variety of shapes and colors. So we have identified every single role within our organization as having one of those 3 role types. We've had discussions, and primarily that identification was through supervisors. We've then confirmed that through individual needs and through employees to make sure that they're aligned to those decisions. And given roles are dynamic and change all the time, we expect that this will be a continuous process for our organization. So, what someone's role is today, the business needs change, roles change, and their role type will change. So, that's, I think answers the 2 questions there, Primo. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, in terms of shifting culture as a result of what you're doing at this time. I heard you say that you engage supervisors and employees. Was there any polling, and I realize you're going through a merger right now, which kind of, everything's off right now. But what was the level of engagement with management and supervisors in terms of talking through this change into the hybrid?
Sure. So it's a hot job market. I'm sure all of you are seeing it. It was before COVID. We're seeing it only get more challenging with the COVID environment. So we have really encouraged supervisors and managers to lean more towards flexibility. But they also understand individual roles, at the micro level, and are really able to create that definition around role type. So, we do have, manufacturing work. We have work that is classified for the government that individuals have to be on site.
Right.
So, it was really important to get supervisors engaged, and really they owned making that decision. And then, we brought employees into the equation to make sure that we are considering personal needs. But, supervisors have really been the driving force behind us ensuring that we're making the right decision.
Leading and managing through change. I really, really like that. I wanted to open it up to Tracy, Kelly, or Kristin for additional comments or impacts that you're seeing in your industries.
I think it was an interesting question that you asked about culture. And I think we need to be very, very careful as we make this transition from in-office work to the remote work, sort of revolution we're seeing right now, that if we don't take care of the culture, as Aaron was speaking to, if we don't take care of the culture, these will all be seen as short-term shifts, short-term productivity increases, short-term benefit. But in the long term, if we are not focused primarily on the culture, and having all of these technologies sort of emanate from protecting that culture, I think we're gonna see the pendulum swinging backward, if you will.
I think you're right. I was reading this book, The Remote Work Revolution, and in there, Neely, the author, she was talking about this autonomy that's come with remote working and how it's made employees actually more committed to the objectives at work and at home because they're more in control of their environment in a hybrid situation or a fully remote situation. So you raise a good point. Any other comments or thoughts from Kristin or Tracy? Anyone else? Before I move on to my next question. Okay. The next panelist I'd like to talk with is Kelly. And thank you for your earlier comments. I wanted to know specifically, how has the pandemic affected your company's physical footprint? And is this change permanent? And I just want to build on that we're reading a lot about companies downsizing, losing office space as a result of the hybrid workforce and people working from home. So I'll turn it over to you in terms of, letting us understand the physical footprint changes that you may have experienced.
Yeah, it definitely affected us. I mean, when we before COVID, our remote work, hybrid work environment, we had 6% of our employees that did some combination of working from home or working from the office. Now we have almost 50% of our employees that are considered remote or hybrid. And we did that for a couple of reasons. When we first started out, it was required. We didn't do this because we thought it was great strategy. We did this because we wanted to survive. So it was really sort of a panic move in the beginning. And then as we developed the systems and the technologies, et cetera, to actually enable that, we saw our productivity go up. And one of the things that occurred to us is that, especially in an area where we're very domain specific, what we do, that we were having trouble pre-COVID hiring people who geographically could come into our offices. We had 11 of them throughout the United States, but we had to find people who actually had the domain and worked near and lived near our office. And we found with the shift, we no longer had to hire people because of where they slept. Now we can hire people because of what they know. And if you're running in Tanzania and have our domain experience, we'll hire you. And that was a tremendous benefit to our company. Now, though, the downside to that, if there is a downside, is that we went from 11 states to now we have employees working in 22 states. I went to the office, I worked remotely, and I ended up going into the office to talk to Erica. And when I got there, I said, well, where's Erica? Well, she lives in Texas now. And I had no idea. So we've got employees all over the globe right now. They're all in places that they want to go work from now. They're back with their families, they're with friends. They're happier working remotely. So I think it is a permanent, well, it absolutely is permanent, especially with our company. But again, we go back to the cultural issue. We've got to be careful of that too, because there is a downside to this.
I absolutely agree with you. And now that you've gone from 16 to 22 states, I'm curious to understand how the pandemic, its impact has accelerated your implementation of technologies so that your employees are digitally able to interact and collaborate remotely. I mean, we had heard Rhonda talk earlier about the importance of understanding and managing remote teams, driving and motivating them. So I'm curious on your thoughts about the digital enablement of your employees' interaction and collaboration.
Yeah, I think there's two answers to that. One is the ability to do our work. Again, that domain specific issue we had where there are certain activities that you must be in our office for. So we use technologies from taking the auditing of paperwork, for example. Now, where do you get the paperwork? To scanning technology, to AI, so that we could distribute that workforce throughout the country as opposed to doing it in, let's say, Agora Hills. Those technologies we wouldn't have rushed into had it not been for the pandemic. One of the benefits with that is that created a competitive advantage because we're a more agile company than our competitors, which are larger and slower moving. And we found that we were able to increase our market share pretty consistently and pretty dramatically because of the technologies that were forced upon us during the pandemic, because they didn't respond as quickly. The result of that was more customers, which meant we needed to hire more people. The ability to hire more people from other states, thankfully, kind of helped evolve that. But since the pandemic, we've had to hire 100 additional people to manage our increase in our workflow. So on that side of it, that was a real bonus to us. The other issue is really, how do we manage the employee engagement with each other? How do we manage our culture, if you will? And we do what everybody does, right? We have Zooms, we have Monday work boards, we have Slack. And in Slack, we have a cute little app that's called Donut that you can download that actually randomly picks people to have lunch together or a virtual coffee together. So we get to meet people we don't know and we get to interact with people. And those are, all sort of temporary measures. But the caveat is that the tech should not replace the culture. And so we are struggling. Getting into technology when the COVID hit was the easy part. It was stressful, but it was easy compared to coming out of it. And we've got to come out of it. Everybody rallies together when there's a problem. But now that things are starting to settle down again, now we've got to make sure that we're back to the same cultural level that we were at before. And that's the hard thing.
Sound like you'll have any issues getting back to that level now that things are settled down. I like the donut concept. I had not heard of that before. And what a great way to bring people together remotely, particularly now since you're spread out through 22 states. And my thinking is the rush to the future of work has really been beneficial, Kelly, to you and your organization when you look at it from a technology standpoint. Other thoughts from Aaron or Tracy or Kristin and the other panelists with regard to physical footprint changes in the organization's physical structure?
Primo, hi, this is Tracy.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi. So yeah, I'm with Manpower Group, and we consider ourselves the leaders and the future of work, and took a really a big role in not only promoting this new hybrid model of work to our clients, but internally, which has been a tremendous impact on myself, my team, incorporating a hybrid model. And I in the Manpower world sit in a physical branch location, but we realized that we could have this environment where I could have my recruiters really kind of create their own schedule, whether they can come to the physical location if they need to, if they have the need for that, or they can work from home. What's been incredibly perfect for us is that we're now involved in recruiting for national ramps that we are not, so for example, my team is helping to support some ramps across the country with some big employers, Honeywell, Tesla, and then conversely, locally, my team has some here in Ventura County, some clients who are in critical ramps, and I have recruiters supporting us to fill those roles from across the country. So I think it's been really impactful, but I agree with my co-presenters or panelists in that it's about the culture and it's about how you keep everyone engaged in this shift. In itself, work your way, having a hybrid model from the employee perspective is great. But I think there is that level of Zoom, fatigue, even our keynote spoke about the Zoom fatigue. And so some things that we have done are, as simple as having, a comedy hour where we actually, had some comedians come. It was nothing about work. It was just an opportunity to laugh, and I think little things like that have made, transitioning and keeping people engaged in the culture not so rigid when it comes to this, because there are aspects of that in this model.
Right. And if I may roll back for a minute for some of our viewers who may not be familiar with the term ramp, you're creating ramps. Can you just define that?
Yes, I apologize. I'm using
no,
my
that's
verbiage.
Fine, Tracy. Thank you.
So, we have some critical increase or supporting. We are partners with our clients who have high needs to hire very quickly. And so we are developing recruiting strategy to fill the high need that they have, employment needs that they have. So they are increasing, their workforce at tremendous pace. And so we are creating those strategies and those ramps to help them get there as a partner in partnership.
Thank you. You have a lot going on there, I imagine. So now unless there are other comments, I'd like to focus on Kristin. Thank you for being here today. And
I did have a quick follow-up actually
please do,
if you don't mind. So I just wanted to underscore something that really stood out to me when Kelly was speaking, and that's what the pandemic situation has done to the pool of talent. So Kelly, you talked about how your employees have been able to work virtually anywhere, and you've been able to attract talent from anywhere. I've seen that at my company too. So, the great news is our talent pool for all of us has opened up, right? We don't have to just recruit in our own town or pay, big relocation fees, right, to bring people. But at the same time, this means that it's a lot harder for us to find good talent because everybody's options are much bigger now, right? And the poll at the beginning, I saw that most people here today have found it more difficult to attract great talent. So I think this just emphasizes what everyone is saying here, that, nurturing a great culture and focusing on employee engagement, not only will help keep, your people, but, be something attractive to potential new talent that you're trying to bring in as well.
I think that is very important. And thank you for bringing that up. I was reading a Harvard Business Review article before we started called The Great Talent Tsunami about, there was a survey done, I think it was Eagle Cliffs, who said 1 in 4 of the employees they interviewed were planning on leaving their position in the next month or so. And I find it very interesting because, as Kelly alluded to earlier, I can actually work and take my talents anywhere in the world and still, be at home. And this issue, I think it was raised the other day in Gerhardt's advisory council here at CLU. Someone brought up the incident where Tim Cook at Apple ordered 10,000 employees back. And about 8,000 of those employees, primarily women, wrote back and said, no, we're not coming back. And if we do, here are the conditions and terms. And it was basically, hybrid work week, this consideration, and that consideration of the employee's personal and professional life, to Kelly's earlier point, becomes a very prominent tenet of your culture. Because how are you responding not only to the changes in the work environment, in the business community, but in your own organization? So thank you for that observation. Aaron and Tracy, comments?
Yeah, one other comment on that. So we, as a company, actually leaned into it almost a year ago. Our CEO announced that we were going to reduce our overall footprint by 25%. And a big part of that was, 50% of our workforce is working remote. We're going to have hybrid employees when we come back. It's a, very different office environment for those hybrid employees that are going to come back into the facility, as well as, obviously those that continue to work from home, will continue in many cases working from home. So, we are now looking at, and goes into the culture piece, how do we create a more collaborative, innovative environment for the footprint that we have remaining that, can really engage our employees that need to be on site. For those that, work remote or hybrid, when they do come on site, in the past, we had small little areas for hoteling that were used by primarily people that were traveling. And now that's going to become more of the norm, versus the exception. So, I really see a lot of change, including, from a savings standpoint, our footprint over the next couple of years will significantly be reduced.
I agree. And thank you for your observation, because I was just reading in the LA Times last week the impact this hybrid work model is having just on, like I said earlier, on real estate in general. And I know my former organization, NBC Universal, is going through that right now. They actually went out and polled the employees about their preference with either working remotely full-time or doing hybrid. And based on those results, then the organization will adapt to the employees' needs and requests. So thank you very much. I'd like to talk a little bit about, Vlad was talking to us about work becoming highly automated, less dependent on companies' physical locations. And I thought this through, and Kristin, I'd like to ask you this question. Your organization's process for deciding which employees and roles are best suited for remote work. Can you talk to us about the process you and the organization use to make those decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to, share my thoughts based on two components. The first is, during the pandemic, how we did that. And now, as we think about the pandemic succeeding and what the future is going to look like. So during the pandemic, the criteria was very simple. It was all about the health and safety of our employees. So anyone who could do their job remotely at home was able to do that, and given the equipment that they needed to do that. And then really only the people who had to go in out of necessity, such as, working on the manufacturing line, went in on site with, extra safety protocol. As we look to, returning back to normal, or the new normal, whatever that's going to look like post-pandemic, I do think employee engagement and satisfaction really need to be the main criteria. We've seen so many articles published lately, like the one you just mentioned from Harvard, Primo, about how employees are preferring at least the option to do remote, if not full-time in hybrid. We've been talking a lot lately about the Great Resignation, many of you may have heard of. So many of us had to work remote out of necessity, right? For safety, like Kelly said, it wasn't really an option, but people became accustomed to that, enjoyed the flexibility. And so many people are leaving their jobs in huge numbers in the last few months because they want to keep that flexibility, and their current employer, may not be offering that. So as we think about what the future looks like, at my company, most subsidiaries are offering a hybrid option. That not all of them have worked out, what that's going to look like. It can range from, the company setting the schedule, such as, Monday to Wednesday, everybody comes in, Thursday, Friday, it's your choice whether you come in or not. One of my subsidiaries is doing it in a way, each department leader gets to work with their people, get input from their team, and kind of come up with a way of working for their department based on the type of work that they do. So each department in the company might look a little bit different, but it's based on the nature of their work. And then I've heard of some companies just letting, getting down to the individual, letting people decide for themselves how many days, remote and how many days in the office. So I would say for all of us here, Vlad and Rhonda and some of my panelists have said it already, like fluid work is here to stay. And I think we do need to offer that flexibility to our employees, or else we won't remain competitive in the marketplace, and we won't attract that top talent that we really would like to have.
It's interesting, and I wanted to ask you, is this throughout the pharmaceutical industry you're seeing? Or are there parts of the pharmaceutical industry, and I realize depending on operations, like, being in the plant on the floor, there's only so much you can do there. But in the other areas, R&D.
Yeah, exactly. So I work on the nutraceutical side of the pharmaceutical company, which is primarily healthy food and beverages and nutritional supplements. Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely right. Anyone kind of working on a manufacturing line, because that's a necessity for all of the businesses, I think, will remain. Research and development is also huge, as you can imagine, whether it's pharmaceutical or nutraceutical, with those employees, needing to be in person sometimes doing, lab work and things like that. But I think as much as possible, we'll be allowing for the flexibility.
Interesting. So you see the same thing across the industries here today. Other thoughts or comments from other panelists here? Anybody want to add anything? Thank you so much, Kristin. Appreciate it. So I'll move on to Tracy, Regional Director of Manpower. You have a huge job with many clients who are probably adapting in many of the ways we talked about and heard from Vlad and Rhonda earlier today. So my question to you is, do you expect your clients and your businesses to increase the number of individual freelancers, contractors, or temporary workers next year, given all the flux we have happening as a result of the pandemic, as a result of technology, and all the other factors? Talk to us a little bit about how you see your clients handling increases or decreases in those categories, again, of freelancer, contractors, or temporary workers.
Sure, yes. So we are seeing all of the above. Our clients right now, they utilize obviously our services to provide the temporary workforce that is going to help them sustain their business at all level. And I know from speaking and being in partnership with my clients, they are using all of the above. Individual freelancers, contractors, of course, a large segment of what we provide is the driver for them being able to, whatever industry they're in, conduct their business. But I look at our Manpower Group Employment Outlook Survey for Q4, which confirms the increase that we're seeing across the board. And for those of you that are not familiar, Manpower Group Employment Outlook Survey, it measures employers' intentions to increase or decrease the number of employees in their workforce during each quarter. And it's a very extensive forward-looking survey, in its size and scope, because it does cover global and national. But we're seeing that hiring optimism has returned since the start of the pandemic. But the results also show that the hiring prospects among all countries surveyed is the US is at the peak. We are seeing that since the beginning of the pandemic, we're at a record high for the need. I think what's happening though is the economic recovery is faster than what we're anticipating as far as our pool of candidates, because workers are taking longer to return to the labor market. So locally, I am seeing that. understanding that this is going to be a trend. It's going to continue. But I do understand that there are some challenges. I know some of us spoke about that earlier, in terms of accessing candidates, accessing people, because they do have choices. I think that's one of the major shifts through the pandemic is that, candidates, especially skilled employees, skilled talent, the competition to win that talent is pretty fierce. And so, so some of those are the key drivers, and the need is there. It's how successful you are as an employer to attract and retain that talent.
Excellent, and a really good point, because I'm listening to you speak and I'm hearing a lot of organizations here today using very much the same framework to bring employees in, to adapt to the rush to the future of work, as Vlad told us earlier. How does an organization in your industry start differentiating itself in terms of attracting talent, given what all of you have said to me about how you're responding to the new work environment, be it hybrid, remote teams, training supervisors to handle remote teams? What are your thoughts on this? I mean, is there a great differentiator, or do you think that's just going to kind of bubble up to the surface as we work through this over the next year?
I think that, through everything we've been through, shutdowns, reopening, everything going virtual, and then an ongoing talent shortage, I think what we do and what I, partner with my clients about is their strategy. How are they going to be competitive? We also produced a report on what workers want. And we surveyed workers from the perspective of, what are key things for them, and what's important. And I really challenge my clients to really consider what workers want and to get the data from the workers to help inform whatever strategy or differentiator they're going to use to be able to compete for that talent. But I think, some of the strategies are, and this isn't always easy for employers, but be wage competitive, because right now that's what, all of this, the shortage of talent is really impacting wages. It's driving them to increase. But I think that beyond that, there is the ability to embrace flexibility. And what I mean by that is, the flexibility of this work-life balance that we're talking about, this remote work, developing that definitely has to be a part of your strategy. There are other things that we didn't consider before the pandemic that are very key differentiators now, and that's speeding up onboarding, speeding up how you not only attract the talent, but how do you get them, how do you get them going quicker? I work with employers who have a lot of maybe lengthy onboarding practices, whether that's a background screen, a drug test, or multiple layers of interviews. We ask them to consider shortening the decision-making problem, eliminating some of that burdensome requirement so that they can get employees through the door, because you can lose them pretty quickly. And then casting a wider net, looking for transferable skills. Those are some of the, what I am seeing locally and nationally is those clients that are looking at transferable skills and really putting an emphasis on that and hiring on potential. Those are the ones that are winning in the marketplace for the skilled talent, because they can develop those employees. So those are some of the strategies that we partner with our clients.
Well, it seems that Primo has disappeared for some reason. He ran away. Can you guys see me? Chris, can you spotlight me? Oh, there's Primo back. You're muted.
He's on mute.
Primo, you're muted.
I'm back. I'm sorry it dropped me for some reason, but I wanted to thank Tracy for her insights in terms of the differentiating, in terms of attracting the talent. I think this issue, and Kelly brought it up, having to hire 100 more employees, you can't tell me that's not going to change somewhat the culture, either regionally or within the organization, that has to be taken in consideration. And for all of you, what do you do? How do you handle those employees who are staying in your organization, given all of the changes in staff that may be coming in or leaving as a result of changes in technology, the pandemic, the hybrid work week? What works? My last question here is, what works for you? Because those employees are very important to our organizations, obviously. They've been here a long time. They have the historical knowledge, and to have 10 years of knowledge walk out of an organization it creates a huge gap, one that's not easily filled, if filled at all. So my last question, I'm curious on your thoughts.
I'll take a shot at this.
Okay, thanks, Kelly.
Business karma is real. If you had a bad culture in your toxic culture in your business pre-COVID, you will see these people run for the doors now that the opportunity is available out there. If you didn't handle your culture well during COVID, which was very, very difficult, you'll see people running to the doors. If you had a good culture going into COVID, if you had an employee-centric, progressive type business where employees actually mattered, and they knew that, and they felt safe in the work environment. And I don't mean safe physically. I mean that they felt like they could buy homes, they could buy cars because they worked for a company that was there for them. And if you walk that walk through COVID, you're not going to see the kind of rush to the doors that we've been hearing about or reading about in the newspapers. You just aren't. Oftentimes, most of the time, it's not always about money. It's about being happy, about spending 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day or whatever you end up spending at a job that you actually are exhausted at the end of the day, but energized and ready to go back to work in the morning. If you're beaten down, like a lot of employees have been and have always been, they're going to find other opportunities there. So this is one of the great challenges. I know Nicholas in the question and answer, what can leaders do to create good remote culture? People analytics, what do you do? We have cultural KPIs at our company that are linked to financial KPIs. We look at things like how many people are getting divorced, how many people are having babies, how many people are buying homes. And we are looking at those things to determine whether or not we have the kind of company that we feel is healthy, because that's a reaction of a good company, of a good culture, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So these cultural KPIs are really important. And then we have this concept we've developed through the pandemic of micro unions. So we've developed not only the unions developed based upon race or religion or countries of origin, so that they can get together and they can understand, they can tell the leadership what's going on the rank and file level. So all of these things are really important for us to actually maintain and actually grow the culture, because in this disruption, we have an opportunity to take a leadership position in the cultural area. And it's so easy. The gravitational pull is always toward higher margins. And the pandemic has allowed us increased productivity, people working at home, and the spotlight will be on those margins and that increased productivity. And we as companies tend to forget that the culture was important to get us there in the first place. And we've got to avoid that kind of gravitational pull as we go forward. So that's a long answer to your question.
No, it's an excellent answer, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's taken the world a very short period of time to understand that employees can be productive at home. That was just the huge taboo. Well, I have no way of gauging their productivity, which was interesting with Tim Cook and Apple when he ordered everybody back. Those who didn't want to come back full time in the office, one of their points was, listen, we have been very successful in our jobs with Apple. You haven't missed a beat in sales outside of those things outside of our control. But in terms of productivity, we have been 100% now. What in return? How are you going to value us in this environment? So thank you very much. I think I should open this up if there are any questions, or Vlad, if looking at the time here.
No, we're good. Primo, we're good. I just wanted to see if anybody else wants to, excuse me, jump in and, answer the same question. And then we'll go to audience questions.
Yeah, on the cultural piece, and it ties into what Kelly was saying, we are putting much more of an emphasis on leadership. And I think leadership now, more so than ever, is critically important. And, you know, we've all heard the adage that people leave bosses, not companies. You know,
Right.
there's a lot of truth to that. And, you know, what we've done is we've tried to be able to put feedback in supervisors' hands more frequently and really increasing the cadence of pulse surveys and opening those up to where leaders can directly see the feedback almost instantaneously. The other thing we've done is, you know, just really looking at the data and seeing, you know, based on attrition and other factors, where we need to help supervisors more, resources, training, you know, just ensuring that we're equipping them for success. You know, so we've really focused on the leadership element. And I think the good news, a lot of the skill sets around leadership, although I think some need to be emphasized a bit more with the current environment we're in, a lot of the core skill sets around relationships and communications and setting expectations, those still, you know, are true today as they were prior to, you know, the current environment. So, you know, I think there's an opportunity to just continually increase the leadership capability, which has a huge impact in this environment.
And Aaron, if I may comment, you pin the mark with the leadership, because building trust remotely requires a completely different set of tools than in presence, face to face, or in absentia of face to face. So thank you for that. Any other thoughts or comments before I have a question that's come up from Rochelle? What are you doing differently to teach or share your culture with remote new hires? And I'll open that up to anyone. Again, what are you doing differently to teach, share your values with remote new hires?
I'll take that. This is Tracy. So I know for Manpower Group, what we do is I have a segment of my own recruiting talent that are remote. And so we have developed kind of multi-layers of how we engage with them in terms of their training, their onboarding, you know, and it really is leadership driven, you know, supporting them in every aspect. We understand and recognize that, you know, virtual fatigue is a thing. And so much like our keynote talked about those wellness breaks of just kind of taking a break in the middle of how we engage with you is one of the strategies that we have used as well. But I feel like for the individuals who are working remotely, having the opportunity to have that individual contact, and we do, believe it or not, jump on the phone as well. You know, I think that that's very, very important, where we take training calls, not on Zoom, you know, do a phone call and our check-ins, because that allows the employee to just kind of take that break. But it's been successful. We have developed kind of layer strategies on how we engage and create a culture of positivity. We have what we call our power rallies or our celebrations and recognitions, you know, and we do that monthly. And although, you know, we are working remotely, I feel like, you know, our culture is so embedded in how we've developed the way that we engage. So.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn the questioning now over to Vlad. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Primo. I'll go with the questions from the audience. Some of them are addressed to individual panelists, and some of them are general questions, so anybody can chime in. And of course, Primo, it would be a shame if you were on the panel and not also answer those questions because of your experience. So the first question is this: what advice do you have for finding the balance of staff members' wants and business needs? So how do you find that balance? Who would like to start? I'm sure it's not easy because otherwise the question wouldn't be there. Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, honestly, I was just about to say that, Vlad, right? It's an easy question. It's very difficult to answer. And really the advice I would provide is, we really need to be able to equip leaders to have the conversation and, understand what each role requires. Are they able to, work remote? Do they need to be in an office environment? Do they need to travel? What does that really look like for them to be able to meet business needs? And then the flexibility piece does come into play, right? And I think starting with a mindset that you want to provide flexibility, but with a recognition that, there are limitations to that. And I think most employees understand that, all businesses have certain limitations to, various requirements that may require them to be in an office or elsewhere.
Kelly?
Yeah, I think, look, the concept of balancing the needs of the employees versus the business is the question itself sets up this sort of across the table sort of relationship. And we got to get away from that in our businesses. As leaders, we've got to understand that the culture of the company, the needs of our people are directly, they're in line with the needs of the company. That a better work environment gives you higher margins, that a better work environment allows the operations to be more efficient. You're going to make more money if you have a better work environment. So so you've got to have on one side a culture. Look, if you had everybody say, okay, I can come to work or you don't come to work and wear your pajamas at work or don't wear your pajamas at work, get your work done or not, that's a toxic culture, even though it seems like it's very employee centric, right? But so it doesn't balance with the needs of the business. But if you've got an organization where everybody is sort of in it together, that your COO and your head of culture are actually, speaking the same talk, then it no longer has to be a balance. It's more of a symbiotic relationship there. It's very, very, very difficult to achieve that. So it's a great question. It's really hard. It's easy to answer. It's hard to execute. So that's what we try to do, and we fail at it, but we are constantly thinking in those terms of how do we more align the people who need to increase margin and have them understand that increasing employee satisfaction increases customer satisfaction. Increasing customer satisfaction increases our bottom line. That we all have to work together for this. We're all the same body. So
absolutely, thank you, Tracy.
I was just thinking about our report, What Workers Want, and that really was driven to, like I mentioned earlier, give to employers to make those considerations. And I think one of the things that I found interesting in that report is being transparent about your why as an organization, because I think that's so important to be able to authentically let employees know, what your purpose and meaning of the organization is. And that helps kind of deliver on, maybe some of the considerations that you can make and that you can't make. So, I know that's one of the driving factors, because, we're right. In some regard, you can't be as flexible, you can consider their needs and what they're looking for, but there are some very hard cases where you cannot make those exceptions. And so I think that's where we want to be a little bit more transparent as organization and employers about, the why of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you very much, Tracy. Makes sense. Now, question for Aaron. How did your CEO or appropriate title of head of the business and other key operational leaders react to the initial proposals of the work from home and hybrid concepts?
Yeah, I think like many companies, it started without a proposal, right? We found ourselves in a pandemic and we were jolted into, keeping our employees in a safe work environment. For us, it meant, having as many individuals work from home as we possibly could and create an environment where we limited staff on site. And it was really essential individuals. We're 18 months in, maybe more at this point, and we're finding ourselves still in that same environment. And we found that we're very productive in it. And our leadership, found that early on. And honestly, I I see that there was some surprise that we were as productive, if not more, in many ways in that environment. So, really large support in that, we intend to, still have a significant portion of our workforce that is either remote or hybrid. And I mentioned earlier that, our CEOs even committed to, reducing our footprint by, 25%. So lots of support there. And, I think it's really a testament to our employees, right? Our employees have, worked through a very challenging environment and continue to do so.
Thank you, Aaron. Next question, actually next few questions, I'm going to tie them together and I'll ask perhaps Kristin to address them. And then maybe Primo also to participate. So the questions really deal with the hybrid culture or, excuse me, organizational culture where hybrid working arrangements take prevalence right now. So one question sounds like this: can remote work decrease the social ties of the office environment? And there are certain aspects that the office environment provides that can be taught. At least that's how I feel about it. Another person is asking, what can a leader do to create a great remote culture? And the third question in the same vein was, I'd like to hear more about building trust remotely. So it's about culture, it's about trust, how to do it if most people aren't even there physically.
These are all excellent questions and important questions. So I think the first thing I would say is like, what is culture? And to me, I think about like, it's the spoken, but also the unspoken, norms and traditions and behaviors, right? That are part of your company that are nurtured over time. So absolutely, I agree with Jason's comment that, you lose some of those, cues that you get about, what is our company culture when people are not in the office. So I think my answer would be, as leaders, we need to be more kind of proactive and overt and probably formalize things a little more. I can share some examples. One recommendation I have in line with what Tracy was talking about is employee onboarding. I think that has to be formalized. When we're in an office, new employees might just show up on their first day. We welcome them, we bring them over to their workspace, and the onboarding might be a little more informal. Whereas I think we need just to formalize it, where we welcome them and have, information for them about the company and how things work and what we're all about, so they don't feel lost. I think leaders need to focus on communication and almost like over communicate to keep people feeling involved and welcome and engaged with what's going on. At one of our subsidiaries, they increased the frequency of the town hall meetings. We used to do them about once a month. Now we do them twice a month. And so the whole company joins in, and the CEO and the leadership team talk about, what's going on in the industry, what's going on with our company results. There's lots of time, for Q&A. So that's helped a lot keep everybody, involved. And I love some of the fun ideas that were shared with traditions. I think traditions set the tone. So I loved Rhonda's example of wellness. She obviously works for a wellness company. And so the fact they block time in the calendar, that is a signal of their culture about what's important in their culture. At our company, we set up on Microsoft Teams a virtual water cooler. So, you don't have the water cooler chat anymore, at the office, but we have a Microsoft Teams stream called the water cooler, and everyone in the company's on it. And people just, here's a picture of my dog who's sitting next to my desk while I'm working. Here's a recipe I tried on the weekend that was really good. It's all the water cooler chat. And so, that shows the importance our company is placing on, relationship building. Similar to what Kelly said about the Slack and the donut app where you can be randomly set up for lunch with someone. Like, to me, that signals, relationships are important in this culture. So again, be proactive, be overt, probably have to formalize some things to, keep things going and nurture the things that you want to nurture.
Yeah, Primo,
I'll just add a few points to what Kristin said. Is so much leadership has to manifest in absentia of physical presence. It's a concept that our leaders really need to understand. And how we navigate through that is specifically what we heard earlier today from Rhonda, from Kristin just now, in terms of how do you build trust in absentia of physical presence? How do you make that connection? And to Kristin's point, I think you brought up onboarding is absolutely critical. You can take the buddy system that we used to use at work to help acclimate new executives or line employees coming in, and you can transition that into the remote space. But it's this feeling of being connected, being a part of, being valued. But again, it falls on our shoulders of leaders, because that leadership has to manifest itself in absence of physical presence, or you're going to see discord, as many of us know. And it's not something that's easily done, as I like Kelly said earlier, we haven't always gotten it right. We all fail. And I think it's important to create an atmosphere in the workplace where failure is acceptable. There's a level that's acceptable, that we learn from, what we didn't do right and go back. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Primo. Appreciate it. So we have 6 minutes and 9 questions. Let's do rapid fire, lightning round, if we can. And if you say that this is a larger question, that I will address this person to you later. Tracy, how can California employers use independent contractors in light of AB 5?
Well, they can't. That's the short of it. And I have no legal expertise, but I would say make sure that you always partner with your HR team and your employment law attorney for guidance on that, and how employers can utilize independent. I mean, you can utilize independence, but that we can go. That's a whole other seminar.
Absolutely, it's a whole other story.
Yeah.
General question. Thank you, Tracy. I wonder if this is going to drive people away from some careers that have less flexibility. For example, doctors, nurses, manufacturing, distribution management, etc. Will this cause these fields to have pay more? Who would like to take this? Primo, would you like to?
I don't know. I'll give you my thoughts. I just read an article on telemedicine, how prevalent it is now, and how the world got used to being diagnosed and talking with a doctor online. Also, our phones now have capabilities in that telemedicine process to articulate what it is we're saying about what we're experiencing physically. I personally believe that technology is already revolutionizing telemedicine, how we interact with our doctors. And I'll give you a perfect example. I had a doctor's appointment the other day for follow-up on some knee surgery for a torn meniscus, and it was done over like this, telemedicine. How are you feeling? And I felt comfortable with it. And it actually served the purpose. And I realized at the same time, it limited the number of patients coming in to the orthopedic surgeon's office. And I did not particularly want to be in that crowded lobby. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Primo. Kelly, the KPIs and your focus on culture are impressive. I've never thought about this area such as divorce and home buying as ways to determine how well the company is doing. How do you go about gathering such type of data? Briefly, if you could, please.
Yeah, well, it's again, you go into people analytics, the whole concept of data internally in the company and the acquisition of that data. We first of all, you have to set up an environment where people will talk about that. You can't require somebody to say that there's domestic violence in their household, for example. So we do have forums. We do have places where people can actually come and chat about this. We do keep track of it. We just don't hear about it. We reach out in many cases to those people who are going through some difficult times to find out what it is that we can do to help, whether it's time off or anything else. But having a full engagement with your staff on some of these issues is important. It's not just a question and answer thing. Again, it goes down to the deep cultural discussion that we have with our employees.
Thank you, Kelly. Wonderful answer. Thank you. Another quick question. Have you ever had to discipline or manage poor performance from a distance? How do you go about it? And in general, have you, well, that's the second question. Okay. So disciplining people from afar, how would you go about it?
Yeah, and I can speak to that. So, I would say in large part, it's, similar, although different. Obviously, they are remote. Then, if you're managing performance, with someone in the office. I have seen cases where, again, geography can make this a challenge where, it becomes such a challenge that you need someone who is there in the office, right? So, they need additional help, they need additional resources, and being in a remote environment isn't going to allow them to have that, and it is a part of their success. So, I would encourage, folks to try to treat it as consistently as, if someone were in the office, with a recognition that, there is that geographic challenge at times that can, make it a challenge, and then, you may have to at times remove that as an obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. I just wanted to add that communication is critical in the form of coaching and counseling.
100%.
My theory was always a good termination or a good act of discipline comes as no surprise to the employee. It does lessen the fact that you are remote, but you need to have that partnership and alignment with the on-site supervisor. But at the end of the day, for me, when the employee walks into the room, they should pretty much know what that meeting is going to be about, Aaron, if you and I did our job. That's all.
All right. Yep. I think perhaps time for one or two more questions. Unfortunately, we will not be able to go through all of them, but I'll put my email in the chat box, and then you can write to me, and I'll redistribute those questions if I cannot answer myself. Now, interesting question from Gary. Many of the good old boys and girls managing companies are not buying into the hybrid model of employment. Be here at the office or be gone. So how do you fix that issue?
You retire those good old boys.
Thank you.
Bravo. Excellent question. Answer. Good question, good answer. Perhaps the last one, let me see. Just in the same vein as our conversation on fluid workers, have any of you established performance metrics or benefits for those who don't work for the company full-time or even exclusively? So those moonlighters and those people who you hire on a temporary basis, have they become part of your talent management efforts or even HR efforts in general?
I would offer in California that gets a little bit dicey here in
state
California with independent contractors and what you can control and not control about the employee's work product.
Anybody else? Aaron?
No, I agree with Primo, right? You certainly don't want to create an environment of co-employment. So yeah, I think, just being cautious of that element of it is very critical.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I would love to continue with such a distinguished group of people. Your answers are, making us think, and hopefully we'll get closer to the answers to some of those questions that we have all posed and that I've mentioned in my short talk. So let's see what happens. I would like to thank you very much. And again, Kristin, Aaron, Tracy, Kelly, and Primo, and right now back to Diana, I believe, for a brief finish with Paul and then a few words from me. Go ahead, Diana.
Thank you. I'm going to invite everyone to return to Mentimeter. We have the QR code back on the screen if you need to see that again, or you can go to menti.com and enter this code 3848-1656. Has the pandemic affected your company's physical footprint? And if so, is this change permanent? A few people are still joining, and we'll go on to the next question in a few seconds. Again, if you left, you can rejoin by going to menti.com and entering the code 3848-1656. Does your organization use fluid workers? And for those who answered yes, has their number increased during the pandemic? Number of fluid workers used in your organization? If your organization uses a fluid workforce, what specific need are you trying to address with those fluid workers? Gaining specialized skills, reduction of cost, air quality, speed, or globalization efforts? And moving on. If you use the outside workforce, do talent management opportunities afforded to your permanent employees also apply to the fluid workers? As a follow-up to this question, making sure everyone gets a chance to respond. Do you believe that talent management opportunities should be afforded to your fluid workers as well? Given the increased demand for fluid work, will your organization be open to an integrated talent management strategy that incorporates both full-time and fluid workers? Last but not least, have you learned something new today? Good to see. For the most part, that is a yes. Thank you all so much for participating. We'll hand it back over to Vlad for some final comments.
Thank you, Diana. And no, it was not me who didn't learn anything new today. answering somebody's question right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me just tell you a few words of, towards the end. we have come to the conclusion of our forum for this year, 2021. I truly hope that you're leaving with some new knowledge, useful insights and tips, and in general with some excitement about the topic of talent management. No matter what industry you're in, no matter what country you're from, people management is the most important aspect of your organization. As both research and practice show, tremendous initiatives to attract, recruit, deploy, engage, motivate, develop, and retain your key talent will continue to be a top priority for organization leaders across the globe. And therefore, we will continue our efforts aimed at bringing this cutting-edge knowledge from academics and practitioners alike to you for years to come.